Hey guys, Mr. Gardner here, and today I want to talk about writing algebraic equations from word problems and just go over kind of a strategy that can help us when we're looking at problems like this. Our objective is I can write an algebraic equation and solve when given a word problem with 80% accuracy. Okay, so that's what we want to do for these problems. Hey guys, Mr. Gardner here, and today we're going to talk about writing equations from word problems. So what I want to do today is I want to just go over a really good strategy for doing problems like this, how we can read word problems and make sense of them so that we can solve them and get the correct answer. So the example I'm going to use is Helen has 2 inches of hair cut off each time she goes to the hair salon. If h equals the length of hair before she cuts it, and c equals the length of hair after she cuts it, which equation would you use to find the length of Helen's hair after she visit the hair salon? So if we just look at this problem from the beginning here, we can see that it's kind of confusing, right? It's just giving us letters and equations, and we're supposed to make sense of it. One thing that's really good to do is let's make these word problems, let's make these values equal some of the words from the problem so that it makes a little bit more sense, okay? So in this problem, we can see that cut off is equal to -2, right? Because the hair cut off each time has 2 inches. And if we're cutting off hair, that should be negative, right? And then it says h equals length of hair before cut. So before cut should be our h value, all right? And then we should look at c is the length of hair after she cuts it. So after cut would equal the c value, right? So when we're looking at these problems, then we can see that we can make sense of them from here, just from, let's try to make sense of the problem. So the first one would tell us, A would tell us that it's before the cut is equal to 2 inches of hair minus after cut. Now we can see if we do it this way, this doesn't make sense. Our hair before we cut it is 2 inches minus the length of our hair after we cut it. Just thinking about that doesn't make any sense. How is our hair before we cut it 2 inches long minus the hair we have left after we cut it? That doesn't make any sense at all. If we look at B in this way, okay, we can see the same thing. Now it's telling us after we cut our hair is equal to 2 inches minus the length of our hair before we cut it. And this also doesn't make sense because in both of these problems we're saying that our hair is only 2 inches long and we're subtracting something from our 2 inches of hair and we're getting another number. So again, just in making sense of problems, these two don't really make sense. If we look at C, then C tells us that after our cut is equal to our hair before we cut it minus the 2 inches. So this one does make sense, right? Before we cut our hair, we have some length. We subtract 2 inches of hair, and that tells us how long our hair is after our cut. That's equal to after our cut. So this one does make sense, right? The way it's written. So we'll just star that one, but we want to write the last one as well. So this last one says, hair cut off, or so before we cut it, is equal to after we cut it minus the 2 inches we're cutting. But this one doesn't really make sense either, right? Because now it's saying that we're cutting our hair again, and we're going to get the length before we did it. So if we think about that, that doesn't make any sense, right? I'm going to have a hair length, and then I'm going to cut it, and then cut it again, and I'm going to have the same amount as before I cut it. So again, if we think about it in terms of the actual words, A, B, and D don't really make sense, but C does make sense. So for a lot of these word problems, okay, what we want to do is really let's write out the scenarios and see how it makes sense. If we just look at this, right, Helen has 2 inches of hair cut off each time she goes to the salon. Okay, so then we would, even if we did it as a picture, here's hair, right? And we could call this before. And then we could draw some scissors. And this is an amazing drawing of scissors. So those are the scissors. Okay, so those are going to cut off hair. Equals hair at the end, right? So I'm trying to make it a little bit shorter. As we can see, the hair is just a little shorter than it was in this picture. But we can see if we combine those things, that is the only one that's going to make sense. And so there it is here. This is our after, right? And it's equal to our before hair minus the hair that we're cutting off. And that's our C answer here. Okay, so one key when we're doing these problems is to make sure that we're just thinking about what the scenario is saying, and then we're just matching letters to that. So H minus 2 equals C. All right, and we just flipped it around, but it means the same thing as a problem like C.